Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. Tonight's shir is dedicated for two very special people. One is Reb Meir Goldenberg. We're going to say a special l'chaim. He's going to Eretz Yisrael. Here's for you. And he has been a very big supporter of this shir, organizing it. Give me some more cups. Huh? I'm not. We found out that he's going to still be connected in Eretz Yisrael. And also Yossi Goldenberg, who's going to the Armed Forces of Eretz Yisrael. What is it called? IDF. Israeli Defense Forces, to protect the Yidden from the enemies. And we want to wish him lots of success, and that the Eibusha should protect him wherever he is, 24/7. L'chaim, l'chaim, give me another cup. Give everybody, give all the people. I only have a tiny bit. Give me more cups. Again, a very special thank you to Reb Meir Goldenberg.
Chaim Meir.
Have
A safe trip and a wonderful year.
Connected virtually.
L'chaim. He's going to Tzfas, and Yossi is going to Yerushalayim, and we wish them all tremendous hatzlacha. The Kibbutzin Teitzei Seira from Postal comes out, the greatest people all over the world now. Baruch Hashem, l'chaim, l'chaim. Shabi b'atzlacha rabba. We want to thank all those who organized the share, Reb Gidon and his family, and the audience for sure. Thank you so much for coming and joining, and for Rabbi Shimel who organizes it. He's also in Eretz Yisrael right now till Wednesday, and he organized the Zoom today. Yep. Family Simcha, brother-in-law is making a wedding, and Asim Sefer Torah. Okay, so last time we were talking about a Jew, a Yid, a chassid called Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich, who the Alter Rebbe 10 years earlier told him, suddenly in a Yechidus, told him to get married, and told him that and he asked him, he knows Mishnayos by heart, and told him Mishnah Oisis Neshama, and for your Neshama, said the Alter Rebbe, it is better to become a baal hagalah than to become a Rav. And he told him to get married with a younger woman, with a younger lady, so he can have children. The Eibusha will bless him with a child. He got married to the daughter of Rabbi Nisanel Sefer of Beshinkovich. Seemingly he was a chassid. And a very fine person. She had a store, some kind of a store, like a grocery store. So he made enough money from that. And he also would teach Talmidim. In the beginning, in the earlier times, he used to teach Talmidim for pay. But now he taught Talmidim, we'll see soon, for free, because he had an income from his wife's store, so he just learned with them Lishma. So now that they came from the city of Lepli to offer him to become a Rav, and he also had a baby boy with his wife, whose name is Abba Zelik, a few years old, whatever, 6, 7 years old, I'm not sure. And he saw everything was fulfilled what the Alter Rebbe said. So, and they came to ask him to become Rav. He refused because he remembered what the Alter Rebbe told him. Now it's time to become a baal hagalah. But we saw last time how torturous it was for him, and how many days he spent crying bitter tears. That after 40, 50 years of learning Torah and serving the Eibusha with chassidus and everything, he's going to become a regular baal hagalah, dress differently, take off his kapota, It was, to him, it was very shocking, and he couldn't handle it. His wife, however, when he told her, she has tremendous amunah pshuta in the Rebbe, and she told him, what's the question? She went and sold her own jewelry to give him a bag of money to buy a horse and a wagon. But he still couldn't calm down and agree with this idea. Finally, he suddenly remembered that he has a friend called Reb Chaim Yeshua from Veliz, who is himself a baal hagalah, a man who knows most of the Shas by heart, all of Tanakh by heart. He travels and Mishnayos. He travels and he studies by heart Tanakh also. And he's and all the people and his sons of this Reb Chaim Yeshua of Veliz. He's a baal hagalah. His sons are rabbanim in cities. So it could be done, he thought to himself. You know what? He decided he's going to meet his friend Chaim Yeshua and talk it over with him, and he'll teach him how to become a baal hagalah. Motzei Shabbos, he found out that Reb Chaim, he remembered about Reb Chaim Yeshua, and he felt bad. I wish I would have remembered before, so I wouldn't have so much suffering and pain. Motzei Shabbos, he came over to his wife, and he said to her, listen, I have an acquaintance, a friend in the city of Belize. He's a Talmid Chacham. His sons are Rabbanim, and he himself does work he's a baal hagalah. That's what his income is. I'm going to him. Now his wife already knew that he's going to become a baal hagalah. Reb Yosef Beshinkovich's wife. She's the one who encouraged him. I'm going to him to learn the malacha, to learn the work, to train and to get a license. Sunday morning, Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich got up, took the bag of money his wife prepared for him, and traveled to Belize. When he came to Belize, he found out that Reb Chaim Yeshua, the baal hagalah, is not at home. He traveled to a big Yerid, a big fair where people go shopping, in the city of Neville. This fair was taking place in the city of Neville. And he's going to stay there for 2 weeks, Reb Chaim Yeshua. So Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich decided, I'm going straight to Neville. He arrived there before Shabbos.
There's not going to have any rooms in the restaurants. In the Christmas. They're going to all be busy, full.
Yep. He went to Neville, came there for Shabbos, and Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich was greeted there as a very, very great guest, a very honored guest. First of all, he had a lot of friends from the chassidim over there. And even those who were not his close acquaintances heard about Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich was famous in those days. A man who was able to explain something, to explain logic, to explain Gemara, a teacher. Could you please close the door? Thank you so much. Rafi, take them, play with them some hoops outside, please. Thank you. Anyway, so he was a very honored guest, Reb Yosef, because people heard about him. He had a very good name amongst all the scholars. That Shabbos became like a Shabbos hagalah. And all 3 meals of Shabbos, they ate each meal in a few places. In 10 different places they ate. And they all enjoyed each other's farbrengens, and they were talking to Torah and stories from the early days. Remember, this is a year or 2 or 3 after, 2 years, I think, after the Alter Rebbe was in Stalik. So they're all talking stories from the chassidish farbrengen, and the chassidim all were in such good mood, in such high spirits, except for one person, Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich, who was depressed, thinking, in 2 more days, I'm going to have a big belt from the baal hagalah, a big wide belt, and I'm going to have a whip in my hand. And that caused them, everybody was happy, he was not. A whole Shabbos, Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich, he was a humble person, but he was watching and observing and looking at the face of Reb Chaim Yeshua, his friend. Everything Reb Chaim Yeshua did, he was observing. He heard his speaking, his farbrengens, he heard his words, and he found him to be a great Jew, a great chassid. And he realized, Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich, that regardless of his business with horses and being a baal hagalah, all the chassidim and all the bnei Torah, what's the word I'm looking for? Mesiachis, huh? They respect him, yeah. They all respect him and they behave to him so nicely. Some people even love him. Not once did he hear anybody in Neville from the chassidim call Reb Chaim Yeshua the baal hagalah. They call him Reb Chaim Yeshua Velizer, from Belize. But not so with me, thought Reb Yosef. I will be a baal hagalah. Everyone will call me Yosef baal hagalah. And when he thought about this, he became bitter in his stomach. Sunday after Shachris, Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich went over to Reb Chaim Yeshua, his friend, and said, you know, the reason I came to Neville, I have to meet with you and speak to you about something very, very urgent. Let's go into a room and talk. They went into a room and they locked the door behind them. Reb Yosef of Beshinkovich started telling Reb Chaim Yeshua a little bit about himself. I got married to the daughter, he says, of Reb Nisan Sefer of Beshinkovich. And Reb Chaim Yeshua, this baal hagalah of Belize, he knew this Reb Nisan Sefer personally. because they were together by the Alter Rebbe in Liadi and Liozne. I married a very fine woman, said Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich, this daughter of Reb Sanol the Sefer. And Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter gave us a son, and we called him by my father's name and my ex-father-in-law's name, the one whose daughter passed away. It wasn't ex because, and his name is Abba Zelik, our boy. My parnasa, my income, is Baruch Hashem taken care of, because my wife has a grocery, a food grocery that she takes care of. So I'm learning with students for free without any pay. But for a certain secret reason, says Reb Yosef to him, I'm forced to become a baal hagalah. And therefore I came to you, please teach me, train me for being a baal hagalah. And then he took out the money bag and he said, this is money to buy for me a horse, a wagon, and all the tools that are necessary. Reb Chaim Yeshua from Belize became literally shocked. He opened up his eyes wide to check if his friend had some kind of a breakdown. Now, something's wrong. The man lost his mind. He knows him. He said, he sits and learns and for so many years. He looked at him with open eyes. The last words that he told him, buy me a horse and a wagon, almost took Reb Chaim Yeshua over the edge. He was so disturbed, Reb Chaim Yeshua, he couldn't say anything. He said, half words he started saying, and he was just quiet. And he started shaking his head like, yeah, the man, he's a goner, his mind is gone. After a while, Reb Chaim Yeshua calmed down, and he said with great nervousness and agitation, he said, what kind of foolish thing came into your mind, he said, Reb Yosef. After learning Torah and serving the Eibishter for 40 years, you're choosing to become a baal hagalah? That's what he told him. Reb Yosef started crying. Reb Yosef Beshenkovich started crying from the depth of his heart. Also couldn't speak. Couldn't say a word. That's how upset he was. And Reb Chaim Yeshua is standing in front of him and crying together with him. They're both standing and crying there. And Reb Chaim Yeshua doesn't know what to say. Finally, he says to him, Reb Yosef, why are you crying? Who's holding a gun to your face? He doesn't say that. He says, who's forcing you to become a baal hagalah that you should, and you're standing and crying? What do you have to cry? Anybody forcing you to become a baal hagalah? Remove your mind from these foolishness. Go back home and learn and daven and do and serve the Eibishter. At that moment, Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich stood up on his feet, because this was the custom of the old chassidim in those days, that whenever they would say over holy words of their Rebbe, they used to stand up. They wouldn't stay sitting. They wouldn't remain sitting. And he told over Reb Chaim Yeshua the holy words of the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe Nishmosein, who told him in Yechidus in the year Tov Kuf Samach Dalet, quite a few years before that. Samach Dalet is what, 1804. 1804. Which is more than 10 years now, or about 10 years. He said, the Rebbe told me these words. And all the words of the Rebbe became fulfilled. The Shidduch, giving birth to a son, and recently some important balabatim, important business people and balabatim from Lepli came to me to suggest I become the Rav in their community. And according to the holy words of the Alter Rebbe, now is the time for me to become a baal hagalah. When Reb Chaim Yeshua heard what Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich told him, his whole thing changed. He says, so what are you crying? You should be the happiest person in the world, that you can fulfill the Rebbe Nishmosein, the Alter Rebbe's words. Come with me right now. I'll choose for you a good horse. I'll choose for you a good wagon, a coach, and all the tools. And today, my worker couple, he had a worker couple, will teach you how to hitch the horses, and in 2-3 days you will know, you'll have a license, you'll know how to be a wagon driver. You'll be a professional wagon driver. Reb Chaim Yeshua's words came down like a hammer on Yosef Beshenkovich. And Reb Yosef Beshenkovich doesn't say here he stuttered, but I can imagine he stuttered out to Reb Chaim Yeshua. Can't the Rebbe's holy words be fulfilled in a different way? I'll be a partner with you. I'll give you all the money, and let couple buy a horse, and let couple buy a wagon, and he'll be the baal hagalah. And I will sometimes travel with him, and the prophets will share. I'll become a partner. Reb Chaim Yeshua looked at him and said, no! In such a way you will never fulfill the holy words of the Rebbe. He clearly told you that for your neshama, it is better to be a baal hagalah from being a Rav. So for your neshama, you have to be a baal hagalah yourself. You can't be a partner for your neshama. When Reb Chaim Yeshua said over these words twice and 3 times, Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich admitted to him, it is the bribe of self-esteem and self-honor that caused me and my koved hamaduma, like imagined honor, respect, that blinded my eyes, he said. In other words, Reb Chaim Yeshua, he says, is right. And he went straight away with Reb Chaim Yeshua to set up his license.
CDL. The CDL.
Reb Chaim Yeshua didn't waste any time. The first person he met, he told him the whole story. The Rebbe told Reb Yosef, this great scholar, to become a baal hagalah. And the next guy, Reb Chaim Yeshua told everybody. And
This is a Neville.
This is a Neville. In a short while, everyone spoke about that Reb Yosef Baal Hasbara, the chassidim called him, or others called him Reb Yosef HaMashber, the one who provides spiritual food for others, became a baal hagalah. Reb Chaim Yeshua made sure that there's no backing out. Now everybody knows about it. I think that's why he did it, but whatever. He was also proud that this guy is doing what the Rebbe told him. A few weeks went by, and Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich got used to his new work, and he started making trips like a taxi from Beshenkovich to all the nearby cities. And as soon as he started, he made himself a system, a choik, a rule, that he doesn't rush on any of his trips. Every night he would go and stay overnight in motels, Jewish motels, and sit and learn Torah. And when he would come to a city, he would make sure to stay there a full day, even though he has to go from from place to place, a full day, and a whole day he would sit and learn Torah. And so Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich, we now know as Reb Yosef baal hagalah, behaved for an entire year until he got completely used to his situation. The Frierdiker Rebbe, in telling this story, does something else that's beautiful, and goes in a little bit to what was happening. Alter Rebbe had just passed away. We didn't finish in our classes here all the history about Alter Rebbe. We still have to talk about the War of Napoleon, which is another, at least one more share, right? But here, the Frierdiker Rebbe says that since the story of the baal hagalah started 10 years earlier, and now it's after the Alter Rebbe's passing, Histalkos, so he's telling us what was happening in the world of Lubavitch at that time. Now, the world of Lubavitch did not exist yet. It was called the world of Chabad. The chassidim of the Alter Rebbe were all called Chabad chassidim, or chassidim. So the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe tells us, he interjects. The Rebbe learned in Lubavitch as a kid.
Yeah, as a kid.
But not as.
He wasn't there when he was a Rebbe.
No.
He called him Baruch Chassidim.
Correct. No. It started now from the Mittel Rebbe. So he interjects is the word, a little bit of what's going on with Chabad Chassidim. After the Histalkos of the Alter Rebbe, which took place on Chof Dala Tevis, middle of the winter, in the year Tov Kuf Ein Gimel, which is 1813, well, maybe 1812, the end of 1812, which is the end of the War of Napoleon, which is actually middle of the war, but towards the end of Tevis, yeah. It could be 1813. The Mitteler Rebbe, after the Alter Rebbe was passed away, it was a very tragic time. The Mitteler Rebbe stayed for a while in a city called Kremenchuk. It's a city with chassidim. And this is called Small Russia. There's White Russia, there's Ukraine. Small Russia, I think, is closer to Ukraine, but I'm not 100%. So the Mitteler Rebbe, who's the Alter Rebbe's son, who's obviously becoming the Rebbe, the next Rebbe, he stayed in Kremenchuk. What did the son-in-law of the Mitteler Rebbe, who's the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, and his family, they went to the city of Hadich, which is where the Alter Rebbe was interned, where the Alter Rebbe's resting place is. And they lived in Hadich. Hadich is a very small town. And the rest of the family of the Alter Rebbe, so the Mittler Rebbe is in Kremenchuk, the Tzemach Tzedek is in Hadich. The rest of the family settled in a city called Ramen, which is close, very close to Hadich. After the Alter Rebbe passed away with Nistalik, there became a huge awakening for the next 3 months amongst the Chassidim of Chabad in the entire Russia. What's the awakening? We'll see in a moment. The Chassidim, all the Chabad Chassidim in small Russia and Ukraine, started gathering in many cities, having meetings, and they chose representatives to go to the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, and beg him to move in and stay and move his living quarters into one of those cities next to them, which is called Small Russia. The Hasidim of White Russia, they also gathered and made meetings in their central cities and all the big cities, and they also chose representatives to go to the Mittler Rebbe to beg him to move his living quarters by them in White Russia. The Hasidim of White Russia won somehow, and the Mittler Rebbe said he's going to move to White Russia. Not yet sure where, but he's going to move there. After Shavuos, that same year, the Alter Rebbe passed away Tevis, winter. After Shavuos that year, the Mittler Rebbe left the city of Kremenchuk and started traveling alone. Will give you enough time to decide where to go because it takes a long time. He started traveling to White Russia from Kremenchuk. 3 months the Mittler Rebbe was traveling from city to city, from place to place, until he arrived to the city of Vitebsk, which is not so far from Lubavitch. Every place the Mittler Rebbe came, he said great discourses, Maimorim of Chassidus. And every place he came, everyone greeted the Mittler Rebbe with great, great honor and fanfare. But not only the Yidden, all the chiefs of police, all the government offices already had gotten letters from the main government, the Tsar's government, that this rabbi called Rabbi Shnei Uri, the Mittler Rebbe, was called Shnei Uri, Doiv Ber Shnei Uri, who is the son of Rabbi Baruchovich, the Alter Rebbe was called Baruchovich, that everyone should show them the greatest help and honor because they helped out the mother Russia, they helped out the country. And the government of the Tsar was very thankful to the Alter Rebbe's family, and they feel they owed him a big thanks, and therefore everybody should respect the son, because the Alter Rebbe passed away during the war. And so every Goyish government official came to greet the Mittler Rebbe wherever he went. Finally, the Mittler Rebbe chose for his living quarters the city of Lubavitch. This is when it started. When did he arrive, says the Frierdiker Rebbe? So Parshas Kisova, he came, this is after Shavuos that he started traveling from Kremenchuk. Took him a whole summer.
In White Russia?
Yes.
Belarus?
Yeah. Or regular Russia, I don't know myself. It's 6 hours drive today with a car from Moscow. Fast driving. It's quite a distance. So Parshas Kisavoy, he started traveling from after Shavuos. Now it's already end of the summer, Savoy. The Mittler Rebbe arrived in Lyozne, not in Lubavitch yet. And Monday, Parshas Netzavim Vayelech, which happened to be Bashgacha Protis Chai Elul, he arrived to the Tov Kufay Gimel, he arrived to the city of Lubavitch and settled in Lubavitch. The day that the Mittler Rebbe chose and came to Lubavitch is very strongly engraved in the memory of all of our families, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, and in the memory of all of the Lubavitcher Chassidim, because of that holy day of Chai El that the Baal Shem Tov was born. He doesn't say here that the Alter Rebbe was born. I don't know why. The arrival of the Mittler Rebbe had such a powerful effect in the entire White Russia and Lithuania, which is not too far, that droves and bands of Chassidim and Yidden came from all cities and villages to see the Mittler Rebbe, to be by him in Lubavitch. There was a poritz, a landowner, a very rich Goyish landowner, called Tchaikovsky. The city of Lubavitch belonged to him, and all the cities around, and major forests. This poritz, he was a very rich guy. He told his manager, when the Mittler Rebbe chose to go to Lubavitch, to bring for free beams, trees, tree stumps and so on, from these forests, wherever there's good beams, to build houses for the Rebbe and his entire family. The chassidim of White Russia immediately set up amongst themselves to first of all collect a lot of tzedakah for the Jews, the chassidim in Eretz Yisrael, which is Kol Chabad that the Alter Rebbe started and the Mittler Rebbe continued. In addition to that, they also set up that they should all support the Rebbe's family with maimet. Everybody gives a little bit every month so the Rebbe's family doesn't have chas v'shalom a problem. The third thing is that all the Hasidic shuls in Russia made a tax on all the members, a charity tax, to send to Lubavitch that any chassidim that come to the Mittler Rebbe for a visit, for Tishrei, whatever it is, should be supported by this money. They should have where to stay and have what to eat and so on and so forth. From month to month, during that next winter of Tov Kuf Ayin Daled, next year, month to month in the winter, people found out about the greatness of the Mittler Rebbe in Lithuania, White Russia, and so on. And the people that came to visit Lubavitch grew from time to time. And the Hasidim of White Russia and Lithuania, their happiness knew no bounds. They were so happy that the Mittler Rebbe settled amongst them. Yep. A year went by since the Mittler Rebbe settled in Lubavitch, and now something new happened. All the older Chassidim that were Chassidim in the early days of the Alter Rebbe, for them to suddenly switch, they were all connected and attached to the Alter Rebbe, subjugated and bottled to him. Now those older Chassidim all enjoyed how the Mittler Rebbe was doing, teaching Chassidus and so on, and they all started coming to the Mittler Rebbe to become bottled to him, to become mekusher to him, and attached and subjugated to the Mittler Rebbe. And this caused all other Chassidim to be so happy. It had a tremendous, tremendous effect on everybody to see the older Chassidim also coming over to the Mittler Rebbe. The chassid, Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich, he was a chassid Alter Rebbe, he had a tremendous desire to go to Lubavitch. But for certain reasons, whatever it was, he just didn't get a chance to go to Lubavitch. And so a while went by, and finally it's already Tov Kuf Ayin Vov. The Alter Rebbe passed away in Ayin Gimel, so Ayin Dalet, 3 years already went by since Reb Yosef wants to go to Lubavitch, and he decided, this winter I'm going. Didn't work out. Winter goes by, Pesach goes by, it's in Sphira between Pesach and Shavuos, and one day, Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich, by the way, all this was just an introduction to the story. Can you imagine? It was between Pesach and Shavuos of the year Tov Kuf Ayin Vov, Sphira days. Reb Yosef of Beshenkovich, Reb Yosef Balagola, was traveling with his wagon to a city called Sena. He had a trip, a business trip, in other words, a delivery to make of some sort. At the end of the day, like he did every day, he pulled into a Jewish motel, a krechma, that was standing on the fork of the road, on the side of the highway. That same evening, a very rich landowner, in those days there was a lot of them, who was from the Poritz, the landowner of the city of Batchekov. Batchekov became later a famous city because a lot of Yidden used to get from that Poritz, or his children or grandchildren. The Yidden got a lot of income, they gave them jobs, and he was very good to them. But I don't know if it was this one, doesn't matter. The Poritz of Batchekov also pulled into that Jewish motel to stay overnight with an entourage. He had a group of people that were with him. There was a nearby village to this motel, and in that nearby village, or community, there was a priest. And the priest felt it was an honor if he can invite this landowner to come to him, to be his guest. Nothing against the Jewish motel, just he wants it.
He wanted the honor.
Yep. So he, the priest himself arrived to the motel that night with some important people of his community, and they asked the Poritz to please come to our village to stay there. The Poritz couldn't send him back empty-handed. He respected him. And so he left and he went to the village. One of the people from his entourage, one of the people that traveled with the Poritz, stayed in the Jewish krechma, in the Jewish motel. Why? Because the Poritz had asked him to do so. He was a friend of the Poritz, to do something, a mission for him, to go to the city of Sena, same place where Reb Yosef Balagola is planning to go. But wait, he doesn't know that yet. Reb Yosef Balagola, it's in the afternoon, late afternoon, he's sitting under one of the trees outside of this Jewish motel, next to a grain storage elevator, and he's sitting and learning Torah. When he finished learning, he walked into the motel. The owner of the motel, the Yid, immediately made acquaintances between Reb Yosef baal hagalah and that guest who was from the friends of the Poritz, who has to also travel to Senna. Seemingly, Reb Yosef told the motel owner where he's traveling the next day. So when he told Reb Yosef baal hagalah that this guy also is traveling to Senna, so Reb Yosef baal hagalah said, "Good. Tomorrow morning, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, we will continue on our trip." "What time?" asks the other guest in the motel. "After davening," said Reb Yosef baal hagalah.
Could be 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
No rush. He made up his mind, no rush.
After davening. "What time?" asked the guest angrily. And he looked at Reb Yosef with scorn, like he looked down at him. "You know, to me it's all the same," he says, "whether you're going to daven or not. I have to know the time we go out on the road. So I have to know, because I have to calculate what time I have to wake up from my sleep, what time I have to take the bath, and drink and eat." And Reb Yosef interjected, "And daven." He finished his sentence. He recognized that this guy was a Jew. "The davening," said the man, the guest, "I leave for you. I don't need no davening." Reb Yosef looked at him with wide open eyes and said, How's that possible? A Jew shouldn't need davening? And by davening shachris, besides the davening, Reb Yosef was an honest person. You also have to put on tefillin. And there's one opinion that holds that the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh are two separate mitzvahs. How is it possible a Jew shouldn't put on tefillin and not daven? This guy spoke his heart. Reminds me of a Mendel going, "You Jew, I Jew, put on tefillin." The guest didn't answer anything to Reb Yosef. And he turns to the owner of the krechma, of the motel, and he says, "Excuse me, an hour before this wagon leaves, wake me up from my sleep." So the owner of the motel turns to that guest and says, "You can sleep as much as you want. As much as you like. You'll have enough time to take a bath, to eat and drink, fully satiated." Because the motel owner knows that before 10 o'clock in the morning, there's nothing to talk about. The guest got very upset. And he told the motel owner, "Do me a favor, send somebody to the nearby village and arrange me for a different taxi, a different Uber, a Lyft, and I'll pay whatever is necessary. But the condition is that no later than 5 a.m. we leave." And he went to his room to sleep, the other guy. Reb Yosef baal hagalah ate some supper, you can imagine already. And he went to sleep for an hour, and then he got up for tikva chatzos as usual, in the middle of the night. The guest, who was in another room, woke up from his sleep, frightened. He hears somebody crying bitter tears. He got up from his bed, opened the door, and Reb Yosef was in his room, but his door was open. So he sees the baal hagalah is sitting on the floor, reading in a sefer with a candle, a wax candle, stachik it's called, this wax candle, and he's crying. The sound of the cry of the baal hagalah immediately went into the heart of this guest. And he suddenly, out of the blue, remembered his youth, when he was a bacher, when he was a kid. He remembered his education growing up in the home of his father. He remembered his teachers. He remembered his wife and children that for so many years he had left them behind and took off and ran away and went following his heart and all the wildness that he did. And not only that, but unfortunately is living with a non-Jewish lady. And she already gave birth to him 2 sons and a daughter. The oldest son and his sister had passed away, but the younger one, the youngest son, is still alive. And this guest, from the cry of Reb Yosef, suddenly started feeling very brokenhearted, very sad. Reb Yosef, in the meantime, finished his tikva chatzos, said brachas with great excitement, went to the river to Tevel. This is between Pesach and Shavuos. It's like summer.
There's no rush.
And when he came back, he put on his talis and tefillin, and he davened with great attachment to the Eibishter. During the davening, somehow Reb Yosef baal hagalah had a memory come into his mind. The Yechidas with the Alter Rebbe, already like 13 years ago, 14 years ago, 13 years ago. he sees in front of his eyes the Alter Rebbe, hears his voice saying to him, for your neshama, it's better to be a baal hagalah than to be a Rav. And Reb Yosef still started calculating how he used to be sitting and learning with Talmidim, and now he's on the road, and he cried. It caused him to cry. The baal hagalah's voice of crying reminded that guest in the nearby room the sound of his father's voice, who also used to daven very excitedly with a great lebedikite, and not once or twice he heard from his father that his tzaddik, his Rebbe, Reb Shlomo, I don't know who this Reb Shlomo is, could be anybody, and how that he used to daven the same way, but the Karoliners used to daven with great chayes, so it's possible, but it doesn't say. His father used to tell him that, and who knows, maybe, says this guest himself in his mind, this baal hagalah is one of a Talmidim, a Talmid from some tzaddik. He remembered all this. He suddenly remembered. He suddenly remembered something that happened in his city when he was still a young boy, or a young bacher. A very strong question came to the Rav, a question in halacha. And all the Gedolei HaTorah, all the great scholars in the city was called Tulchin, which is in Podolyer County. And they all agreed to his father, this guest, his father was a Rav, or a great learned person. His name was Reb Tzvi, the carpenter. And they all agreed that the Shaila, that he is correct. His father, Reb Tzvi, the carpenter, had a very good name all over. He was a chassid and a lamdan. And a few times, they offered him to become a Rav in the city, but he didn't want to. And the Oirach, this guest, who was sitting in the nearby room, we're going to finish in about 4 minutes, Mitchum, whose name was, the Frierdiker Rebbe now reveals his name, Shlomo Leib, suddenly remembered his whole life suddenly came in front of him. When he was a bocher, when he was a kid, and the first steps he took to leave the way of life as his father had educated him. He had a very talented friend, whose name was Avraham Doiv, a very learned person and a Yireh Shamayim. But suddenly, this friend of his, Avraham Doiv, as it happens, became totally a heretic, a pekaris. He suddenly stopped believing in the Eibishter Chas v'Shalom, and he became a maskil, an enlightened Jew, a reformed Jew. And that friend, he remembered now, Shlomo Leib, was the first step and the first reason that started to cut him off from the life of his father's family. And he went down from step to step until when his father passed away, he left his city, left his family, and left everything. And now, and in a very miraculous way, he remembers all this. He met in a certain motel a poritz from the city of Vachekov. This is the poritz that he's friendly with. From the area of the county of Chernigov, and the guy asked him to become a manager on all his estates. And there he completely left Yiddishkeit. He connected himself with that poritz, and when the poritz became engaged and got married, this poritz, he became his personal secretary, and that's where he met his non-Jewish companion. Should we stop here?
No, go.
The motel owner in this motel came over to the room of Shlomo Leib and started knocking on the door. The guest, Shlomo Leib, understood. He probably wants to tell me that the driver, the taxi driver from the nearby village that he rented for me is coming. But suddenly Shlomo Leib, the guest, said in his mind, I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait for the Jewish baal hagalah, this guy over there, next door. When he opened the door for the motel owner said, I got for you a good wagon. In an hour he'll be here to take you. And I already prepared coffee for you, he says. Sounds like today's motel almost. Shlomo Leib thanked the motel owner for his labor, and said, I decided I'm staying here for a few more hours. He gave him a silver coin, give the baal hagalah a silver coin, which is a lot in those days, for his troubles, for coming here for nothing. And the coffee I'm not going to drink yet. And he closed the door. in the motel owner's face. In other words, he closed the door quickly because a stream of tears came bursting out of his eyes, and his heart was aflame and in a storm from the davening of the hagalah. And again, a spring, a well of memories opened up in his mind. He remembered his wife, his children. Who knows if they're even alive? How do they make money? How do they support themselves? How much embarrassment they suffered because of me. How much embarrassment and poverty and hunger. Why? He asked himself. How respectful and nice was his wonderful Jewish wife. Such good midos, good behaviors. His father-in-law, who was a lamdan, a very relaxed person, how much he loved him. And how much his mother-in-law respected him. Also a person with good midos. Shlomo Leib thought to himself in his mind, cursed is the day that I met my friend Avram Doiv, the Apikoris, who pushed me away from the way of life. And Shlomo Leib cried bitterly. An hour went by, 2 hours went by, and 3 hours went by, and Reb Yosef baal hagalah is still standing and davening with great excitement. Reb Yosef baal hagalah's trembling voice, begging Hashem, like crying out to Hashem, had such an effect on Shlomo Leib that he was walking around in his room from corner to corner. He couldn't find himself a place to rest. The davening of Reb Yosef baal hagalah, saying Avas Olam, and all the words, Shlomo Leib understood these words because he was once himself in a yeshiva and learned. It pierced the kidneys and the insides of Shlomo Leib, and he swore right then and there, this is the end. From today on, I am going to go back to Yiddishkeit. I don't care what. I will go back to my wife and children. I'll go back to the Eibishter, to my religion. And he went to the motel owner and he said, can you please lend me your talis and film? And he went to his room, put on talis and film, and cried bitterly and davened. Reb Yosef, the baal hagalah, finished his davening, finished learning his shiurim as usual, Chita, Sayim, whatever, Rambam. No, I don't know what he learned. And he started preparing himself to go to Sena. But the guest is still locked in his room. And when Reb Yosef baal hagalah came out from his room, the motel owner, the Kretschmer, the Jew, told him, the guy borrowed my talis and film. So Reb Yosef said, I'm waiting. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to wait for the guy. In this trip, Reb Yosef baal hagalah's job was to deliver boxes from Beshenkovich, scheiras, different merchandise from Beshenkovich to Sena. So he wasn't rushing. There's nobody rushing him. He has to just deliver it. So he decided, that's it. There's no rush. I'm going to wait for...
No live chicks in the boxes and livestock or anything.
It's a scheira. I'm going to wait till the guest is ready to travel with me.
Maybe you had a case of eggs.
The snakes here stay a long time.
A while later, the guest opened up his door, called the motel owner, and said to the motel owner, I feel very sick. I can't travel today. But I do want to travel with this baal hagalah, he says. Please ask him if he can wait for me till I feel better, because he wasn't feeling well. And I will pay him for everything, including the trip and the days that he has to, what is it called, wait time in the Uber. And I'll also pay him for food that he has to eat here in the motel, for all the food that he has to wait for. Reb Yosef baal hagalah agreed to wait. But in the evening, this guest, Shlomo Leib, really was sick. And he was sitting there, lying there in bed with very high fever. All night, obviously the motel owner and Reb Yosef were coming in to see, to make sure he's okay. All night, he was speaking from fever, incoherently. Hallucinations, words that had no connection. They heard him say names of people, names of different women, Jewish, non-Jewish. Some of them he was angry and cursed them with terrible curses. Some of them he was begging. And so all night he was hallucinating until the morning it became a little better. The fever went down a tiny bit and he fell asleep. We're going to sit here all night. In the morning, Maybe we should stop here, no? I'm ready to go. It's 8:04. I don't mind. Yeah, well.
Wherever you end in the story, it's still going to be a
It's still gonna be a
cliffhanger.
cliffhanger, yes. It's true. Let's do a little more. Okay, we'll go.
At least it's get him to send
Huh?
Let's get him to Senna.
Not so fast. Not so fast. Not so fast.
Okay, maybe.
He ain't coming to send it today or tomorrow. Anyway, in the morning, another balagola. These balagolas were like taxis traveling on these roads all the time. It was a very, popular. The Jewish population was all over. So early in the morning, another balagola pulled up to this motel. This guy's never sitting there with fever. This guest, balagola pulls up there. What was his name? Yaakov Leib, the balagola from Bachekov. What did this balagola do? He was traveling with people who hired him to take him to different fairs to go shopping. And it's also in the area of Senna. When Yaakov Leib saw the sick guest, Yaakov Leib, the new balagola that just arrived, he immediately recognized him. They showed him the sick man. He really recognized him. This guy is the Ish Soide, how do you say that? A real confidential secretary, like confidant, and advisor of the young poets. And this guy's name, he says, is Solomon Gometsky. His name was Shlomo Leib, but that's what they called him because he gave himself a non-Jewish name, sort of. And Yaakov Leib told over to Reb Yosef Balagola and the Kretschmer owner, this guy behaves horrible. This Solomon Gometsky in Yiddishkeit, and he has a shiksa he lives with, and he has a son with her, a shegetz. But then he said, this guest, Balagola said to them, but he has one great thing about himself. This Apikoros Gometsky. They call him the Apikoros Gometsky, they call him Bachekov. What is his good thing? He always deals very nicely with all the Jewish people. From the day he became an advisor to this young poets, all the estates of the poets, from him and from his father-in-law, that means the mill, the windmill to make money from, and the water mill, and the rivers that you capture fish, that you catch fish, and most of the kretschmers all over the roads, all was given over, sold or rented only to Jews, all because of this terrible guy. And they also, not only did they rent it to Jews and sell it to them, but in very good conditions, money-wise. You see what a Jew is? When Shlomo Leib woke up that morning from his sleep, he begged the motel owner to please call the balagola, the Jewish balagola, to go into him, to his room, Reb Yosef. When the balagola sat down, Reb Yosef balagola sat down, this guy started telling Reb Yosef balagola his whole life history from beginning to end. Everything that happened to him from when he went away from Yiddishkeit until today. And that yesterday, he says to the balagola at night, or the day before, I decided to do tshuva completely. I don't care what's going to happen to me. I'm leaving this terrible behavior. I'm going back to my wife and children. When he finished speaking, he was quiet for a few moments, and then he started crying, and his body was trembling. Reb Yosef Balagola, a Jew who grew up only in holiness and Yiddishkeit, was shocked to hear what the guy told him, all his terrible things, to how he behaved as a Jew. For a moment, Reb Yosef Balagola felt angry at him. For a moment, he felt mercy on him. But when he saw how agitated and excited this man is, and he saw that he really means it, he wants to go back to Yiddishkeit, he had such pity on him, he started calming him down. From these words of comfort that Reb Yosef Balagola was telling Shlomo Leib, he got even more agitated and cried bitterly. And he said to Reb Yosef, a sinner like him, that's the way people looked at it in those days. There is no medicine, no cure, he said. Only chas v'sholom, to die with terrible pain. Only then, with such type of punishment, will his sins be forgiven. And he said to him right away, he says he accepts on himself all these sufferings as long as the Eibishter will help him to get rid of that non-Jewish lady and their son that was born with tumah, defilement, and that he should be able to go back to his Jewish wife and children and remove the terrible shame that he brought upon them. I just want to say, so you shouldn't get worried, he didn't die, chas v'sholom, with pain and so on and so forth. Anyway, After a while, he calmed down a little and he asked Reb Yosef baal to please give him his tallis and film. And since Shlomo Leib was very weak from the fever that he had for 24 hours, he had to help him put on the tallis and film. And after davening, again his fever went very up. He cried and he spoke incoherently again. But Reb Yosef, the baal, who already heard his whole life story from all these incoherent words, he understood that these are words of repentance and going away from his terrible behavior. Okay, can we stop here?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so very much, and with Hashem's help, we'll continue. I'm telling you, the mile of this story is it brings us from the Alter Rebbe